All right. We are now streaming live. Good evening, Facebook. Good evening, Washington, D.C. We
Wait,
are
wait, wait.
here for the DC Council Ward 2 Candidate Forum put on by Team Racine. But before we get into that, we just want to give everybody an opportunity to know what our upcoming online projects will be. So let me just start sharing the images. There we go. So welcome everyone. This is the DC Council Ward 2 Candidate Forum, moderated by Racine Penn Darvis. Now, if you don't know Team Racine, we do a lot of things around the district and we have a lot of things coming up. So I hope that you can join us for those activities. First of all, we have Music Mondays with Racine Penn Darvis at 12 noon Eastern on Facebook Live, and that will be on Racine's Facebook page, the one that you currently are on now. Then on Tuesdays, we have Tantalizing Tuesdays with Racine, featuring myself as well at 11 p.m. Eastern, once again on Facebook Live. Then at Wednesdays at 12 noon Eastern, we have Read a Book Wednesdays with Racine Pendarvis. You don't get some literature in your life and chicken soup for the soul. So that is Read a Book Wednesdays with Racine Pendarvis at 12 noon Eastern on Facebook Live. Then on first Wednesdays for the next couple of months, as long as the Ask Racing show is on hiatus, we will be doing the special first Wednesday Facebook Live with Racing Pendarvis. The next one will be May 6th, 2020, featuring Krillius as well, special online event with shameless plugs and more during the temporary hiatus of the Ask Racing show. And I must remind everyone that donations are appreciated. We love donations. It keeps us afloat, it keeps us alive. So Cash App, that would be # Ask Racine. And you can catch up with us on first Wednesdays on Racine's Facebook page. Also, if you want to catch up with what we're doing, aside from just the things we do on Facebook, we have been doing a lot of online content on our YouTube page. That is Team Racine's YouTube page. The link is there at youtube.com/c/Team Racine. We have a lot of content there. We have vlogs from doing our events and doing our shows. We have interviews with the candidates, even the candidates that are here tonight in our Ward 2 forum. We have interviews with all of them there. And we're also doing interviews with the sponsors for the Ask Racine show. We're doing interviews with local and international celebrities, public figures, and politicians. So make sure that you check out our Team Racine YouTube page. And don't forget to also follow us at Team Racine on Twitter, facebook.com/Team Racine, and at Team Racine on Instagram. And if you want to keep up with whatever we're doing, you can check out our Eventbrite page, which is teamracine.eventbrite.com. Now, are you ready? Are you ready to vote? Well, pledge to vote, check your status, and register to vote. You can go ahead and text Team Racine, that is TEAMRAYCEEN, to 40649. Once again, you can text Team Racine to 40649. And that is by headcount.org. And we love Headcount. We've been a partner with them for years. Next, you guys need to know the way how to vote this year. So we want you guys to request your mail-in ballot today. Now, this mentions that you can mail in your ballot or you can go to an early voting center. Well, right now they're closed until further notice. So we want you guys to, take advantage of the 6 ways to request your mail-in ballots. You can go online to www.dcboe.org or download the Vote for DC app. Request your mail-in ballot at www.votefordc.com/apply instructions/absentee. You can also go ahead and email DC absentee. There we go. DC absentee at votefordc.com. You can fax 202-347-2648, and you can mail to the DC Board of Elections, 1015 High Street Southeast, Suite 750, Washington, D.C. You can also give them a phone call at 202-741-5283. And those are our shameless plugs for the night.
Great. Thank you, Kilios.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And now we're coming up to 7 p.m., which means we are now at the beginning of our forum. Welcome to Yes, we are, guys. So, guys, hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Kilios, if you're just joining us here at 7, and I am the MC and producer for Team Racine Productions. I want to welcome everyone to the DC Council Ward 2 Candidate Forum, presented by Team Racine Productions and the Washington Blade. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator, MC, columnist, community advocate, and lifelong Washingtonian, Racine Pendarvis. Hello, Racine, how are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Salutations to everyone and greetings to all. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to turn this over and we're going to introduce our representative from the Washington Blade.
Just before we do that, let's go ahead and thank our production sponsor for tonight, and that would be HF Pharmacy. We want to go ahead and thank them for being our production sponsor. We also want to go ahead and thank our Team Racine volunteers, including Nikki and the man who put this all together, our project manager, Czar. Next, we thank our partner, the Washington Blade. Thank you so much for partnering with us to do this wonderful event. Thank you. And Lou Chabara is here from the Washington Blade. Say hi, Lou.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here and happy to be a part of this important event that Racine and her team is putting together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now let us introduce our candidates for this evening. First of all, I am seeing Patrick Kennedy here. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good evening, and thanks so much, Team Racine, for putting this on. Lou, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much. My name is Patrick Kennedy, Advisory Neighborhood Foggy Bottom. Thank you for having me.
All right. Hello, Jordan.
Hello. I'm Jordan Grossman. I'm a candidate for Ward 2 City Council here in DC. I'm a 5th generation DC resident, and I've spent my career in public service.
Hello, Danielle.
Hi, good evening. Thanks, Racine. Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Kilios, for helping out. I'm Daniel Hernandez. I'm Marine Corps Afghan vet, father of 2, and Ward 2 candidate for DC Council.
Awesome. Hello, Yelin.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Team Racine, the Washington Blade, and everyone for tuning in. My name is Yelin Ellen Zhang. I'm a Democratic candidate for DC Council Ward 2. I'm a first-generation Asian American, originally a transplant from Michigan, and came to DC about 10 years ago.
Thank you. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Kilios. I'm Brooke Pinto. I'm running to represent Ward 2 on the DC Council in the primary election June 2nd and the special election June 16th, and I'm the former Assistant Attorney General for Policy and Legislative Affairs in the DC Attorney General's office.
Thank you. Hello, Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack Evans. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Team Racine, Lou Chabara, the Washington Blade, and everyone for putting on this candidates forum. I represented Ward 2 on the council for the last 29 years and hope to continue to do so.
Awesome. Hi, John.
Hi, I want to thank Team Racine, the Washington Blade, and the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. My name is John Fanning, and I'm a candidate for Ward 2 DC Council. I'm a 6-term ANC commissioner. I'm the current chair of ANC 2F. I'm the former community relations representative for the mayor's office. and I'm the one and only openly gay candidate running in this election. Thank you.
And hello, Kishan.
Hello, and congratulations to the Washington Blade on 50 years of serving our city. I was proud to go to your 50th anniversary event at the Outrage earlier this year. Congratulations and keep up the great work. My name is Kishan Putta, and I've worked on healthcare in DC for the last 15 years, for the last 6 years with DC government implementing President Obama's healthcare plan to help many thousands in this city, including the LGBT community, who I issued several grants to help. And lastly, I am, Racine will appreciate, like Racine, I'm a former ANC commissioner for DuPont Circle, but I'm also a current ANC commissioner in the Georgetown area. I've been elected in 2 neighborhoods of DC to serve the residents of our ward.
Thank you so much, Kishan. Now, the lone Republican running in the primary and special election is Catherine Venice, who unfortunately was not able to join us tonight as scheduled. Hopefully, we've heard that maybe we could have her join, so we are open to that, and let's see what happens with that. Now, though, we are at the question and answer portion of the night. So first up, we'll have Racine draw the names at random to ask individual questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Let's go.
Thank you, Krilios. For all of our candidates, names were put in a bowl, and the questions I'm picking randomly. First question will go to Brooke. What is your position on stop and frisk? And what do you think the role of the DC Council in regards to instances of police brutality and misconduct? I repeat that question again. Brooke, what is your position on stop and frisk? What do you think is the role of the DC Council in regards to instances of police brutality and misconduct?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that stop and frisk has been racially applied and has had really detrimental effects on our entire community in DC and around the country, and that there's a lot more oversight we need to do as a council to ensure that our police are not traumatizing our community members. And it really starts with community trust. We need to educate the police officers and our community around what the rules are. We need to make sure that not only do we mandate body cameras, but that we're following through on reviewing that footage. We've seen many instances where the police officers have the opportunity to review the body camera footage before they submit their incidents reports. And that is ripe for abuse. And so that's one of the places to start, but we have to ensure our police officers are not traumatizing our community members, both those who commit crimes and those who are just going about their regular business and being identified as a suspect for no real reason other than racial reasons. So it's a practice that we absolutely have to stop and have to make sure that we increase our training and our programs so that our police officers are monitored and supported. Go ahead, am I out of time?
No, you have a few seconds.
Oh, I just wanted to add that I'm grateful to be here with you all this evening and looking forward to the discussion as we work toward protecting our community. I was proud to write the legislation to allow our office at the Attorney General's office to prosecute hate crimes in our city, because we were seeing that the US Attorney's Office wasn't prosecuting those crimes. And I'm looking forward to expanding on that legislation and making sure that our community has what they need to be safe.
And we thank you. We thank you for your passion. Our next question is for Jordan. You have an extensive experience working in the government. Do you think your experience ever creates a disadvantage when trying to understand what happens in the private sector of relating to the working class? I'll repeat that again. Jordan, you have an extensive experience working in the government. Do you think your experience ever creates a disadvantage when trying to understand what happens in the private sector of relating to the working class?
Thank you so much for that question. I think that my experience in government, working for President Obama, working for DC's Medicaid agency, working on Capitol Hill for Senator Amy Klobuchar, working for a DC federal judge actually gives me a lot of insight into how we can best serve our workers and the working class here in DC. I think a lot of what I've spent my career doing is advancing the values to make our city more progressive and equitable and inclusive and affordable. And so, it goes from at DC Medicaid, what I was working on was making it easier for people to enroll in services that workers in our city need. That's nutrition assistance, that's housing assistance, that's healthcare assistance. I think that's across our working folks in our city, but also including the LGBTQ community, where we see a lot of health and economic disparities. And so that's something I've seen throughout my career that we need to address, and we also need to study. So when I was working at in the Obama administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, we fought to make sure that we were collecting more data on LGBTQ, the community, to make sure that their health needs were being addressed by our government. We fought also to implement the first federal civil rights law that applied sex and gender protections to all healthcare programs. And so I think that, the last thing I will say about that too is that working in government is a partnership with all of our community, especially our small businesses and our workers. And so I think one of the biggest and most important parts of working in public service is listening to the community, listening to workers, listening to businesses, listening to everyone, and trying to achieve results that make government work better and make services easier to access for everyone, especially for those who can't afford a super well-paid lobbyist or aren't special interests that have high-level connections and in conflicts of interest. I think that's what we need to prioritize the most, is making sure our government works for the working folks in this city. And I will say, I'm really proud to have the support of many of the unions representing workers across our city. The Unite Here Local 25, which represents hospitality workers, they just endorsed me today. We have the healthcare workers of SEIU and many others, the AFL-CIO, the teachers, the transit workers, and on and on. So thank you for the question. I really look forward to working on behalf of the workers of the city on the DC Council.
Thank you. You were great. You were there. Once again, here is our next question, and it will be to Jack. I will repeat it twice and allow you to answer. When did you decide to run in the primary, but not the special election? And if you do not win the primary, have you ruled out running as an independent in the general election? I will say that again. When did you decide to run in the primary, but not the special election? And if you do not win the primary, have you ruled out running as an independent in the general election?
Well, thank you for that question. And I had always planned to run in the Democratic primary for re-election to my seat. And so that is something I had planned to do years ago, months ago, and even during the time when I was going through the investigations at the council. I resigned my seat and made a decision not to run in the special election because I felt it was important to take a year off, which is what I will do if I win the primary. I look at it this way, although I don't agree with what happened, I am paying the penalty, so to speak, of the actions that occurred. So I'm very much looking forward to winning the primary, campaigning very hard during the summer, winning the general election in November, and taking my seat on the council in January. And this is so important as well. Right now, the District of Columbia is facing extraordinary times, as is the whole nation. And as was mentioned in the Washington Post 2 weeks ago, I am the most experienced person in the city when it comes to the finances of this city. And we can talk about all the issues that are important, and there are certainly so many of them. But the finances of the city will dictate where we go. I helped us get through the 1996 control board era, the 2001 recession that we had, and the 2008-2009 recession. What you need now at the council is someone who understands this budget better than anyone, how we are going to cut almost $800 billion from our budget, and how we are going to continue to run this city for everyone who lives here. We have to prioritize what's important and then make very difficult decisions, something I have done many times in the past. So I'm very much looking forward to representing the ward on the council and contributing my financial expertise to putting our city back on track again.
And I thank you. And Catherine has now joined us. I'm going to unmute her. Catherine,
So
can
I'm
you hear us?
you.
Catherine? Catherine,
Okay.
you have now come in. Can you turn
So I
your
can't
camera
hear.
on? We'll give her a few seconds. Catherine, are you there? Can you hear us, Catherine?
Can you hear anything?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. We have a breakthrough. It says, oh, we have a breakthrough then. Sorry.
Please turn your camera on. You have joined us at a late time and we are extending the hand of courtesy.
Okay, so I'm struggling to hear, and I think that if I put on the video camera, it will take Wi-Fi. So why don't you just dive into the questions?
Well, we haven't come to yours yet, so we will explain the rules. Can you see us on your screen?
I'm sorry?
Can you see us on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so good. So Kilios explained the rules early, and I'll just give you a brief rule. Each question will be pulled randomly for every candidate. We ask that when a candidate is speaking, no other candidate will speak. Questions will be given to you and only to you. Kilios is our timekeeper. When he flips the fan once, he flips it twice. Your 2 minutes of rebuttal 2 minutes of time to answer that question is over. If you go over, I will mute you.
Yes.
All right, and at the end, each candidate has a 3-minute time to make a closing statement.
Okay.
All right, thank you so kindly. And our next question is for John. John, what is your plan to replace the DC jail and how soon could that happen? I'll say it again. John, what is your plan to replace the DC jail and how soon can that happen?
Great question. So that was part of our question at the American Civil Liberties Union Forum. And I think we should explore land over by Blue Plains, by DC Village. But I think one of the first things that we should do as the government is try to get management over our courts and our criminal justice system. But I would support building a new prison within the next 2 or 3 years. And I think it's really important that we do that because we transport our DC residents that are sentenced to 35 different states. And I think part of the rehabilitation process and the support network starts with families and children. And I think that they need to be closer to their families so they could start the re-entry process. So I think there's either federal land or district-owned land where we could build a state-of-the-art correctional facility. And I think it's very important that we start laying the groundwork now to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is for our next candidate. Yiling, you have not held public office before. How do you address concerned voters who may have about any perceptions about lack of experience? I'll say that again. You have not held public office before. How do you address concerned voters who may have any perceptions about your lack of experience?
Thank you for that question, Racine.
You're welcome.
So I've spent the last 10 years working in the healthcare industry. I have published research. I've worked in strategy, in consulting, operations. I currently work as a business development executive at one of the largest integrated healthcare delivery systems in the United States. I have managed large projects of millions of dollars with a number of people. So I have a lot of experience from both the public sector and the private sector. And what I've learned most in all the career roles that I've held is really to think broadly and to have a larger vision, to look at what are the root causes of issues, and from there create the solutions that will really tackle the issues that we have. So what I hope to do is bring the experience that I have in working in research, in policy, in the private sector to the DC Council. And I think it would benefit us to have a candidate that has worked in this multitude of roles. And I am running for office, not because I want to be a career politician, but because I want to get things done. I want to see us develop real solutions for our homelessness population. I want us to see us create legislation that will provide real relief for our small local businesses. I want to see us achieve DC statehood because we were shortchanged $750 million because DC is not a state. So we have a lot of large issues that we need to tackle as a community. And I am someone that throughout my career has demonstrated working across different perspectives, working across different organizations, working to find real solutions. And I am committed. I am someone who does things. I am a doer. And I describe myself as a hustler too. I'm an immigrant and my parents have sacrificed a lot for me. So I know what it means to start with nothing and build something. And that's really what I've done with my campaign. So I would say that the personal and professional experiences that I've had actually put me at an advantage to make sure that Ward 2 and DC has a vision for the future. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. And for our next candidate, which will be Patrick, how would you address gentrification and housing as a council member? I'll repeat that question again. How would you address gentrification and housing as a council member?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's probably the most important issue facing the city right now because we need additional housing here. There's no question about it. We don't have nearly enough housing units, and especially family-sized housing units in the city to meet demand. But we also need to do a much better job of preserving the existing housing that we had. So the District of Columbia has not used the District Opportunity to Purchase Act, for instance, which was created 10 years ago, so that the district could step in and buy apartment buildings that were up for sale in order to preserve the tenants' rights that were there. We currently have a somewhat unwieldy TOPA process, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. We need to do a much better job using district resources to help stabilize affordable housing, particularly rental affordable housing. And particularly right now, in terms of periods of time when you have a down market, I also think it's very important for us to go in and create essentially long-term covenants on existing affordable units. You know, when the market is uncertain, when it's uncertain what the next couple of years are going to be in the real estate industry, and when prices are maybe leveling off for the next short period, we need to buy up 20 or 30-year covenants to lock in rents at very low rates, you know, give a guaranteed rate of return, but lock in rents at low rates over the long haul so that we don't see the conversion of existing affordable housing into new units. It costs about 3 times as much to create affordable housing as it does to preserve the units that are already in place. So if we're going to stretch our dollar and create and preserve, we need to do a lot better job on the preservation piece. I think the city has not honestly gotten ahead of development. In many cases, we've seen that as development has spread eastward throughout the city in neighborhoods like Shaw, along H Street, and increasingly it's going to be east of the Anacostia River too. We need to get ahead of those trends, and we need to have housing policies that affirmatively center the rights of long-term residents, particularly long-term renters that are subject to the whims of the market. We need to make sure that they have the means to stay.
And thank you. I feel like this is a wonderful experience for all her viewing. I feel like this is one of those wonderful pageant moments when, like Miss America or Miss Universe, you know, to all of those contestants who have competed over the years, God bless them. And to all you candidates, I just want to applaud you, because anytime you stand for anything, you stand for something you believe in, making a change, making a difference, and being committed to our community. You are now a part of activism, united all across the country. So I applaud each one of you. I know it's a moment, take a breather and let it go. All right. So our next one is for Daniel. Daniel, your website states that you want to help minority-owned business. How would you do that as a council member? I'll repeat that again. Daniel, your website states that you want to help minority-owned businesses. How would you do that as a council member?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Racine.
You're welcome.
I think this is definitely, something that's key as an opportunity for building, generational or community wealth. I think there's a few ways that we have to go about it. One is reforming a lot of the processes that allow existing businesses to, let's say, work through or contract through another organization in name only, if you will. We need to make an effort to really tackle the problem and not just make things look nice on paper so we can claim credit for doing something. I think it's also, we need to let's say build the pipeline, if you will, of how do we increase entrepreneurial assistance, how do we make it easier to start and operate a business, period, as we look at streamlining and easing business processes and regulations, as it's something that we also consistently hear, particularly for small businesses that don't have as many funds available for lawyers to spend 6 months to a year going after a liquor license and so on. I think it's also a part of, as we look at our education system, and enabling people for trades or training people for trades, as we look at a lot of small businesses are things like a small construction firm, a plumber that went into business for himself. And when you enable more people with those skills, you'll see more of those businesses succeed. I think it's also, as we look at government contracting and avoid how often business simply goes to politically connected entities, as we see through various oversight hearings at the council. And if we improve some things like that, we enable more people who didn't grow up with the resources, didn't grow up with the connections, but they built the skills over their life, and they built something that they can actually use it and succeed, and not be pushed out by those who simply know a bunch of people. There's a lot of things. I'm not going to pretend it's just one simple answer, but I think it's important to have someone with the perspective and the intent, and really feels connected to a lot of those issues, to see them through, not just say things in name only. Thank you.
And thank you. To our next candidate, which is Catherine. Catherine, if elected, you would be the sole Republican on the DC Council and the first elected in several years. How would you, being represented by the Republican Party, benefit the residents of Ward 2? Let me say that again. If elected, you will be the sole Republican of the DC Council and the first elected in several years. How would you, being represented by a Republican, the Republican Party, or representing Republicans, benefit the residents of Ward 2? Catherine?
I am. Hello?
We can hear you.
I can't hear. Hello? Are you able to hear me?
Yes. Yes, my love.
I couldn't hear your question. I heard something about Republican, but I couldn't hear anything else.
I'll repeat it again. Can you hear me now? It's a delay.
I'm just getting a lot of interference and slow motion Darth Vader sort of sound.
Facebook cannot be on if you're on Facebook because
Okay.
you're looking at a delay, so you're hearing it afterwards. So
Are
make
you
sure
on
you
a
turn
phone
on the
or
Facebook and just listen.
I can't hear anything.
Okay. What I would suggest is I'm going to hold your question until you get your audio together. I'm going to mute you, get your audio together, step away from Facebook, and if you're on your computer or your...
I can't hear anything.
Mute, please. Thank you.
All right, we're going on to our beloved Kisha. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. You've been a Republican, an independent, and a Democrat. Why are you a Democrat now? And how does that party affiliation influence your positions on various issues? I'll repeat that again. You have been a Republican, an independent, and a Democrat. Why are you a Democrat now? And how does that party affiliation influence your position on various issues?
Great, and I totally appreciate the question. I know that the people of DC and the people of Ward 2 want a representative who represents their values. And that's why I have been working very hard for the last decade on serving the values of our ward and the values of our community. President Obama's healthcare plan, I helped implement it in DC. We got it started in DC when everywhere else was having problems. Everyone had concerns about Obamacare. I got to work to help because I knew it was important that the people of DC got healthcare coverage. And you know what? We covered thousands of people in this city, including the LGBT community. I oversaw Obamacare grants to Whitman Walker Health, to Mary Center, to the DC Center for the LGBT community. And we did outreach on the streets and in the alleys and in the corners, and we got people covered. We got DC's uninsured rate cut in half. We are the second lowest uninsured rate in the entire country, and I was very proud for that. And then I attended the the Democratic convention in Philadelphia in 2016, and I saw that that party has the ideals of Obamacare and covering people in healthcare, putting that first, and the other party does not. They do not care. They do not have a plan, and they left people behind. That is unconscionable. I am a proud Democrat. I am an officer in the DC Democratic Party. I am the chair of the DC Democratic Party's Asian Pacific Islander Caucus because I am a proud son of immigrants, and we need to fight for the rights of immigrants and other vulnerable people like the LGBT community, and I will do that. I've been doing that for years, and I will do that as your council member.
And we thank you. And once again, we thank everyone for their passion, for your commitment, and your dedication.
Thank you. I forgot to say BAM.
Yeah, you did. You did, and you said it under your before we gave you the fan. So we appreciate you and thank you all again. At this time, we're going to.
We are definitely next. We're going to have Lou from the Washington Blade do the second round of questions. Now, I want to remind everyone that Racine will state the name of the candidate. We'll just pick a candidate, and Lou will read the question. So that is how we will begin. So Racine will pick a candidate at random, anybody on the screen, and then Lou, you will give us the question. So Racine, let's go. All right. Before we begin, I know that it's been a moment. If you need to take some water and a breather, please do that now. Please hydrate. Hydration is so important, everyone.
breathe, shake it, reset, relax, release, and relate. And let go. All right. Our first question will go to Brooke.
Yes, Brooke. My first question here is, how would you assess the mayor and the DC Council's handling of the coronavirus crisis in the District of Columbia? And what, if anything, might you do or might you propose, if elected to the council, to do differently than what's being done right now to address this serious problem?
So I think that the mayor and the council have done a wonderful job dealing with a crisis that nobody could plan for. I'm really pleased to see the free testing sites that have been placed throughout the city. I'm really pleased to see that more employees have been transferred over to the Department of Employment Services to really issue all of these unemployment insurance claims that are increasing more than our city has ever seen before. I'm pleased with the mortgage freezes and debt collection freezes that have gone on, but there's much more that we need to do to really help address this crisis. I'm very concerned about our small businesses. They've already run out of grants at the federal government level, and so we need to do more to advocate more effectively for the additional funding that we are owed, the additional $750 million that was given to every other state. And I believe there are more effective ways to advocate for that on the Hill to get the funding. We also need to increase our own small business loan programs here in DC and make sure that they're easy to administer. We shouldn't be making all of our small businesses go through this burdensome bureaucratic process to not only figure out what the application means, but apply, wait for it. It's not an intuitive process. And so that needs to be cleared up. I also think that we should move towards offering antibody testing for free. We know that the experts estimate there will be a second dip of this virus in the fall or winter. And so we need to do a lot more to build up our resiliency and make sure that we can prepare for this crisis. I invite you all to read my full COVID recovery plan, which is on my website, www.brookepinto4ward2.com. It deals with recovery ideas both for our businesses and our hospitals and our schools, as well as how to balance the budget so we can do this, so we can ensure that our most vulnerable residents have what they need, but also that we're maintaining the long-term financial health of our city. I do not think those things need to be mutually exclusive, and I will work very hard to ensure we continue the good work that the council and the mayor's office has already started and expand upon the supports that our community really needs right now.
Thank you, Brooke. And I turn it back over to Lou with our question for our next candidate, Kisha.
Yes, Kishan. Just a quick follow-up on that issue of the coronavirus problems and how the city is addressing it. As you know, part of the city's programs to address the issue is disaster relief loans. Some are coming from the federal government and some are coming directly from the DC government in the form of micro grants and other financial assistance. But we've been informed by some of the small businesses that a little noticed exemption, or rather exclusion, in that program is that so-called adult businesses that are operating fully legally under DC law are excluded from those loans. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on whether you would support the request by those small businesses, obviously, that they should be able to receive those same financial benefits as the other businesses.
Absolutely, Lou. Absolutely. And thank you for raising it, because that's arbitrary. And at the end of the day, hurtful and harmful. These, whatever the business is, a legitimate business, the people who work there, that's who I care about. The people, they are regular, everyday people. In this case, often low income, people of color, LGBT community, people who are vulnerable. And in times of crisis, they're the people who need our help the most. We cannot turn our backs on them. And absolutely, we need to fix that loophole. I noticed that in the micro grant program. I scratched my head. I was like, why? Well, that doesn't make any sense. And I will add that we too, just before this forum, very proud to put out our Road to Recovery on our website, kitchen4dc.com. You can click on the Road to Recovery, and it includes a lot of things, including we were out there first on capping the fees on restaurants by delivery companies so that our restaurant sector can be more profitable. Like you said, there's a federal money and there's a local money. I think the DC microgrants need to be expanded and renewed monthly, and they can be paid back later on once sales get back in there. But we should suspend rent. We should defer taxes. And I take this very seriously. I worked for DC HealthLink on small business issues for the last 6 years, helping small businesses across our city, Compass Coffee, DC Brow, many others, to help cover their employees. I know what they're dealing with. I know what they're struggling with. I call them on the phone daily, and this is tough. My whole family's in small businesses, and we need to help them now, otherwise we might lose them forever. And you have that commitment from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Kilios, our lovely timekeeper, how are we doing? Very good. Our next question is for Jordan.
Yes, Jordan. Yet one more related to the crisis we're facing now in the city, but this is on the financial side. In early February, just before the seriousness and the extent of this crisis became known, including the what people are calling a really devastating impact on the DC finances due to the shutdowns of so many businesses, a coalition of LGBTQ organizations here in DC had proposed or reiterated a proposal that they made a year earlier to the DC Council and the mayor to have a budget allocation of $22.6 million to fund what they feel are really needed programs to deal with LGBTQ people in need. Many of them unemployed, transgender women of color who have historically been facing problems in economic survival. And we all know now, though, that the budget for the city, both in the current fiscal year and the next one, will be taking large hits. What would you say to these organizations who are making an appeal for those funds?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think one thing that the coronavirus pandemic has exposed is some of the racial and economic and health disparities that existed long before the virus, but we're seeing made even more stark by this. And so I think the request, the budget request, is actually, you know, as you mentioned, it's not that large of an amount of money relative to the $15+ billion budget that DC has. So I think one thing we're going to be looking at in response to the coronavirus in the context of the budget is, what are our values? What are our priorities? You know, there's a lot of folks who will say, we got to cut our way out of this. We have to cut our way out of this. And a lot of them are the same folks that said, we couldn't, you know, we can never use the rainy day funds because it's just, what are we going to do the next time? Well, the rainy day is here right now. And so I would say to those groups that we need to invest in you now more than ever, because you are the folks who we need to talk about, folks who are most vulnerable, our workers, our families, as you mentioned, trans women of color, so who are often struggling with unemployment. I know the DC, there was a trans needs assessment that showed 50% of employers had discrimination against trans job applicants. That's just not acceptable. And it's no more acceptable because we have a coronavirus situation where we're gonna have to deal with our budget. So I do think that we can and must invest in our LGBTQ community. And I just want to take a step back as well and say, look, I have worked in government quite a bit in my career. I have identified taxpayer savings over and over again, billions of dollars, in fact. So investing in our priorities is possible, and it is essential if we are going to have the DC that we want, if we are going to have an inclusive DC, and if we're going to rebuild in a way that includes everyone. And it's not just sort of handouts for folks who have the most well-connected lobbyists or the special interests who are going to, seek tax breaks and sort of call for a trickle-down approach to recovery. I don't think that works. I think we need to invest in the LGBT community, in our workers, and in the folks who have been suffering from disparities, whether health, economic, racial, or otherwise, for a long time, but which have been made so much starker by this crisis.
All right, our next candidate is Daniel.
Yes, Daniel. One of the issues that has been of concern to the LGBT community is the problem of hate crimes. Many in the community have been subjected, especially transgender women, to hate crimes committed against them and targeting them because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And in covering that beat for quite a while, it turns out that many of the perpetrators, including some of the recent cases, turn out to be juveniles. And part of the city's juvenile justice law, as you may know, of course, keeps the identity of a juvenile arrested and charged with a crime as strictly confidential, but it also keeps confidential the outcome of the case against them, the disposition of the case, whether they might be found guilty in a juvenile court. And some in the community are asking for the council to change that law to, of course, keep the confidentiality and the identity of the youth confidential, but to require that the outcome and the disposition of the case be disclosed to the public so they can find out if justice has occurred to the victims of these crimes. Would you support legislation of that nature?
Yeah, certainly. So I think this is one of those things also, keeping track of statistics and crime so that we know how we're doing and what we can do better is pretty important, as we also look at, for example, the NEAR Act, which, kind of required lawsuits to force MPD to comply, and we're still working through that. I think it's important to the community to know how these cases go. Absolutely, the confidentiality is paramount. And if for some reason it's impossible to maintain confidentiality as well as release that information, compromise like aggregating the information across like case history over the past 6 months, the past year, maybe. But if we already know that there are cases and we just don't know the result, I personally do not see a reason why it would not be possible to let people know what happened. And a lot of times just the ability to have that closure can be, healing or a little restorative to, to the community or to what happened. Simply never knowing what happens, particularly as we struggle with the federal government that's particularly atrocious on following through enforcement and prosecution of hate crimes. Having the information to say they're doing this or they're not doing that is important as we look to do better across the district. I guess I'll also say really quickly on this topic, this is also definitely one of those areas that emphasizes how we need to control our court system and how we need to control, the entire criminal justice system instead of ceding these responsibilities to the federal government where we don't have the control.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Our next candidate question is Yulene.
Yes, Yulene. One of the issues that is coming up now in response to the public financing program that is now in effect for DC elections beginning this year. And of course, I believe 8 of the 9 candidates in this race, including all but one in the Democratic primary, have chosen to use the public financing program. But what it has done, according to some observers, is it is, and quite justifiably, enabled more people to become candidates. And therefore we have now 9 candidates in the Ward 2 election and 8 in the Democratic primary. And some are asking whether you might support legislation, should you become a council member, to require a runoff election if no candidate receives at least 51% of the vote, so that someone who could win under the current system might win with 20% or possibly less of the vote if the vote is split. So would you support that type of legislation?
Thank you very much, Lou. So I'll answer in two parts. The first part is with DC fair elections. I am, and as most of us candidates are, in support of DC fair elections. What it does, like ranked choice voting, which is runoff voting, it levels the playing field a little bit more and makes it easier for candidates, non-traditional candidates, to run for office, which I am a big supporter of. I think everyone, no matter your race, ethnicity, your profession, I think everyone who wants to run should have the equal opportunity to run for office, because that is what makes our democracy great. And in terms of the runoff, instant runoff voting, ranked choice voting, this is actually a policy that is in about 12 states right now and is actually all over the state of Maine. And what it does is that, like I said, it evens out the playing field, and it makes sure that when we have a crowded race, such as Ward 2 right now, that the most popular candidate who gets more than 50% of the vote wins the race. And I am fully in support of that. This came up in our last forum on March 5th at DCCA LCCA. And the question was asked, you know, if the previous incumbent, Jack Evans, wins, would you support, would you allow the voters to speak their voice and say that he would stay in office? But what I said is that I challenged the DC Council to pass ranked choice voting, which has been long in the running. Councilmember Grosso had reintroduced the amendment of 2019 on ranked choice voting. And I think that's what we direly need, not just in this election, but in all our local races and also at the national level, because right now, June 2nd is such a critical date for local and national elections. We need everyone to go out there and vote. And what ranked choice voting does is it makes sure that every candidate has an equal opportunity at running for office. Thank you.
Thank you. For our next candidate, our next question will be to John.
Yes, John. We know that in Ward 2, there's a large number of bars and restaurants and other small businesses that have been hit very hard, many of whom employ LGBT people who, like so many others, have been laid off or furloughed. And some of the organizations representing nightlife establishments and businesses have put forward two proposals. I want to see if you would support those if elected to the council or advocate for them. One is that they're calling for a one-year moratorium on the payment of sales taxes by local businesses to be able to support their recovery. And the other is to have asking that the council and the mayor not put in place any increase in taxes, licensing, or other business fees for the next several years, all of which could hurt small, struggling businesses. Where would you stand on those?
Great question. As you know, I am the chairman of ANC2F and represent a majority of the 14th Street corridor, where there's quite a few bars and restaurants. And small businesses, as you know, are the lifeblood of our neighborhoods. So we need to do everything that we can possible to support each and every one of these businesses reopening after this pandemic. And I think that the proposals that have been discussed, I would support totally. And I also think that I would be supporting, or if I was on the council, I would be introducing the interruption insurance that many of small businesses don't qualify for and won't pay for lost revenue or pay business owners anything so that they could support their unemployed workers. Also, I have a lot of neighbors that work within the bar and restaurant industry, the hospitality industry. And I think that some of them are undocumented. I've been working with many of them to secure funding through Events DC, who have proposed $5 million to help many of these workers, many who reside in the Logan Circle and Shore community. So yes, the answer is yes. We need to do everything we can possibly to make sure that these businesses are capable of opening. So my answer is whatever we need to do, because, you know, they're the backbone of our economy. If we don't help them, you know, we're already seeing businesses closing. Like just now recently, they're not a small business, but the Human Rights Campaign just laid off 22 employees. So we really see how this pandemic, COVID-19, is really affecting members of our community. So I would do whatever I can possibly do if and when elected to the council on June 2nd.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. And our next question actually is for Jack.
Last one.
Jack, yes, thank you. This is an issue that dealing with, again, how this epidemic is affecting so many different things in the city. The issue of elections and campaigning. There has been some advocates now that are asking the Board of Elections to, number one, make sure, of course, that they are able to handle mail-in voting, which the city is encouraging right now in the midst of the epidemic. Another issue that hasn't come to the forefront as much, but could be just as important, is that we're hearing from independent candidates who will want to get on the ballot in the general election, require several thousand signatures to get on the ballot. And if the social distancing restrictions are still in effect, it could make it absolutely impossible to gather signatures needed to get on the ballot. And so a proposal is coming forward about whether this could be done electronically. The technology is there to do it. Where do you stand on that? Would that be something the council should do if legislation is needed?
Well, it is going to be a very difficult situation for individuals running as independents to get the signatures because of the virus. So I would definitely support some way of electronically getting the signatures. The technology is there, whether the Board of Elections can put that into place as quickly as is needed is anybody's guess, but they're working very hard down there on a number of issues. And so hopefully they would be able to do that. I don't know, I think the Board of Elections could probably implement that on their own. If the council had to pass a law to do it, I would encourage the council to do that. There are so many unknowns though, Lou, as we go forward as to when social distancing is going to stop happening. I happen to believe it's going to take place into the summer and maybe into the fall. And so it's going to have a necessary event is going to have to happen in order for the independents to get on the ballot. You may remember this has been discussed about this whole ballot petitioning process for years, whether we should still do petitions, whether or not people should, I think someone had a suggestion once, be allowed to pay to get on the ballot instead of getting petitions, things of that nature. So I know there's a number of suggestions out there that should be looked at in addition to going around and getting petitions. And I think it's going to be necessary. I think even when this crisis subsides, if it does in July and August, people are going to be very leery about having someone come to their door and signing a petition in the environment in which we're in. So it's something the board has to look at, the council has to look at. It's a very important issue.
And thank you, Jack. And our final question before we go into the rounds of hearing from all of our candidates in their final closing statement will be for Patrick Kennedy.
Should I present that question?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sure, Patrick. One of the final ones on my list here is something that you've all been asked before in other forums, but it's still on the mind of a lot of people. including advocates of those who are economically in hard shape and so forth. And that is the legislation that, of course, was proposed by Councilman David Grosso to decriminalize sex work among consenting adults. It's on hold at the moment. But has your position changed on that since it first came up, and where do you stand on that now?
Yeah, Lou, thank you for the question. My position remains consistent on that, which is that the status quo is untenable. It doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't benefit the residents who raise quality of life concerns. It doesn't benefit the sex workers who are victimized. It certainly doesn't benefit those who want to engage in consensual commercial activity. So the status quo is not tenable. We need a way forward on it. My concerns with the legislation largely are about some of the vetting that has taken place with it. I think this is one potential solution, but frankly, I'm not convinced of the applicability of a policy that's really been only tried at scale in New Zealand, in the District of Columbia, where the laws and cultures of the United States and our surrounding jurisdictions are, very different from what they are on the other side of the world. And I think that there are thoughts that have to be put in to how you would implement something like this. And if there are unintended consequences that would flow from that, be they an inducement for trafficking or a reduction in the ability to enforce trafficking cases. I think that those issues can be worked through. My background is as somebody who does community engagement. So I think a large part of that, and I think the model that I would seek to employ at the council with this or any other piece of legislation, is to get all of the stakeholder groups in the room to try to work those issues out. I think that this issue is something that a lot of advocacy groups have done a really great job on. We are not there with a degree of support in the communities of this city for this to effectively pass. There are 5 co-sponsors on the legislation right now. Co-sponsors at the council doesn't always translate to votes when it comes up. So there's not 7 votes. There's certainly not 9 votes to overcome a veto. I want to commit to supporting something, but I want to commit to supporting a durable solution, something that's going to pass, something that's global in its scope and addresses all of the outstanding challenges, and something that's unimpeachable from a process standpoint, coming up through the community that respects the concerns that people have. Particularly John, I think, understands this in Logan's Circle, the community concerns that have been raised there. I want a solution that works and that attains public support. I think an initiative is potentially a route to go with this, although I will note that I think a lot of the advocates didn't want to go that route because they were not sure that this would pass. We don't want the movement to help out, I think, the most vulnerable among us, sex workers, particularly trans women of color. We don't want to move this in a non-strategic way that leads to a setback for them. We need to make sure that we move forward with something that's well considered, as our strategy was on marriage equality 10 years ago. I've managed these sorts of difficult processes at the community level. And I think for a ward council member, it's very important to have leadership that's rooted in community engagement and understands how to do it and understands ultimately how to get a solution that gives everyone what they need, if not entirely pleases everybody at the end of the day. And I'm committed to doing that on this issue.
Thank you, Patrick, and once again to all of our candidates, we thank you. Unfortunately, Catherine was unable to come in due to technical difficulties, and we do apologize for that. And for those who were watching and were a part of this, we tried our best to bring her in. And for those who are online watching, let me state that we were having some technical difficulties, and we apologize for the disabled and deaf, that we did not have an interpreter here to do what we needed to do, but the call came out, but we were experiencing some technical difficulties. And unfortunately, that wasn't able to come to full vision. So we do apologize that, but we will take note and we will make sure that when we do this again, that we will have those that will represent our deaf and disabled community. We will go out and beyond the call of duty to make sure that they are represented. I do apologize that. I do apologize for the inconvenience for those, and for those who are online and following us on the Blade website or the Racine's Facebook page, which is mine. I say to everyone, I appreciate your comments, I appreciate your views, and I thank you. But please remember to be kind, and please respect those and comments that are not very nice. Please refrain from those. Keep those to yourself, especially in the world that we're living in, We want to see love, we want to see change, but we want to see folks come together more than tearing each other down. It's easier to tear someone down, but so much better to build each other up. Let us work together, let us be better, let us learn from this experience that no one is perfect. But if we stand together united, we can bring down walls, we can change the world, but we have to do it together. And creative, constructive criticism is so much better than reads and unkind words on social media. And at this time,
definitely. Yeah, so at this time, we're going to go into our closing statements, and each candidate has 3 minutes for their closing statements, and we're going to adhere to that. All right. So we will begin with Patrick Kennedy, who just went. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, Krilios, Racine, all those czar who contributed to putting on this forum, and Lou, it's always an honor to work with you. I think you're a real legend in the community, and your journalism's been so fantastic in covering things that really don't get a lot of press otherwise. So I really appreciated getting to know you in the course of this campaign too. Like I mentioned at the beginning, my name is Patrick Kennedy. I've been an advisory neighborhood commissioner in Foggy Bottom for the last 8 years. I'm in my 5th term serving as the chair of the commission. And I got involved in local government because I really feel like at this level especially, what you're focused on every day is solving people's problems, not necessarily getting into very ideological or talking point driven fights. You're solving issues at the level of government that is closest to the people. And that's been the most rewarding thing for me, and all of the volunteer service I've done in the years has been able to, work with people and find those solutions and those areas of common ground. I think, Racine, you really touched on it, working together with people to achieve things. That really is the most powerful part of engaging in things from the bottom up and from the community level. And the most rewarding experience for me in the course of this campaign has been getting to better know the LGBTQ community and having especially support from a lot of people that I respect and whose support confers a great deal of obligation and responsibility on me. This ward in particular has had 2 council members in 45 years. And both have been pretty stalwart allies of the LGBTQ community. This is the historic epicenter of the community in this city. And I think the council member for this ward has a special obligation to be a leader on a lot of these issues, whether we're talking about the funding requests that groups like Smile and Casa Ruby and Wanda Alston came up with last year. I was so honored to have the support of Ruby Corrado, and seeing the work that she does on a shoestring budget for people in our city who, I recall walking in there one day and she told me that, a lot of the people that I was seeing would not live to the age of 35. And when you confront that, it's not a statistic, it's a face. And you see, you can see all the statistics, the 40% unemployment rate for trans women of color, the 40 to 50% of homeless youth who are LGBTQ. You can listen to statistics. It's a different thing altogether when you experience it. And it's a face on, I think, the most pressing challenge facing our city. If we live our values, if we are centering equity, I think there's been a perception that we've made a lot of great advances in LGBTQ rights, that we have marriage equality, and that we're on, the glide path and the downslope, into full normalization. And when you see disparities like that, you know that it's not true. And you know that there need to be leaders. And I'm particularly cognizant of the fact that we have no LGBTQ members of council currently. One LGBTQ member of the State Board of Education, Jack Jacobson, who's been very supportive of me, and I'm tremendously honored by his support. And we have leaders like John in particular, and a lot of others who have done a lot over the years in our communities. And I think the role of this council member too is about uplifting other voices and building empowerment in the LGBTQ community and raising the visibility of those sorts of voices. I think so much of this job, particularly when you get to the Wilson building, is not so much what you say and giving the right answer and everything. It's about priorities. And my experiences in this campaign, the trust that has been put in me by the people who support me, has really instilled an obligation in me to essentially center the community in everything that I do. And that starts with this year's budget, but it is an everlasting commitment for the ahead. And I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to speak about these issues with you this evening. And I just greatly appreciate the consideration and the support of all of those in the LGBTQ community, hopefully with an eye towards the 2 elections in June. Thank you very much.
Next, we will have Yilin.
Hi, everyone. This is Yelin Ellen Zhang. I want to first thank Team Racine, the Washington Blade, all of our amazing moderators, and thank you to everyone for tuning in. I'm running in the June 2nd primary and the June 16th special election. And about 7 months ago, I decided to launch my campaign. And there are several reasons why I'm running for Ward 2 DC Council. One of them is our homelessness crisis. Ward 2 has an intense crisis where many individuals do not have a home, do not want to go to the shelters, and for a number of reasons. In the conversations that I've had with some of the individuals who are living on our streets, they do not want to go to the shelters because they do not feel safe, especially our women who are unsheltered. They feel like it's not clean, they're bed bugs, and they can't go if they have a partner but no children. They can't take their service animals and pets. So there are a number of reasons and barriers to our unsheltered individuals, and they cannot find stable housing. So my biggest focus area is to ensure that we dedicate the resources to find our homeless population stable housing, and also to make sure that they have access to wraparound resources, including mental, behavioral health care, drug addiction resources, and everything that they need in an effective and efficient manner so that they can get the care that they need when they need it. The other reason is, as we are seeing, we need to focus on building and maintaining a resilient structure for our community. And that includes for our small local businesses. We need to find real relief for our small local businesses because it is estimated that almost 90% of businesses owned by individuals of color did not get anything from the Paycheck Protection Program. And we need to make sure that our unique businesses that are local are able to survive past this year, to thrive in future years. And that means working with them to make sure that they have access to grants, not loans. And DC does have a micro grant program, but $25 million is not enough to go around to all of our small businesses. So that's something I will focus on. The other part is with COVID-19, we're seeing that everything is virtual. And unfortunately, all of our children and their families, they don't have equal access to technology. And we need to make sure that we get individuals the resources, access to technology so that they can have equal access to education. And then of course, as we're now seeing, we don't have DC statehood. And that's something we need to work really hard toward, because without that, we're seeing that we're shortchanged in millions of dollars. And we need that in order for our business and our communities to thrive. So with that, let me just say that, I've never held local office, never held political office, but I'm willing to create something out of nothing, and I'm willing to work hard. And the signatures that we collected for our ballot access, the money that we raised, I individually and personally reached out to all of those hundreds, thousands of individuals. And I'm lucky now to have a small but lean team. And if you would like to learn more about my campaign, you can see my website is up top at yelinforward2.com, and I'm on social media. So please reach out, and we look forward to hearing from you and hopefully have continued conversations. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll have John Fanning.
Yes, thank you so much. And I want to thank all the candidates who have been very inclusive and supportive of LGBTQ issues. As the only openly gay candidate in this race, improving LGBT equity is very important to me. I've been active in the movement since the 1980s. I volunteered as a buddy as individuals were experiencing challenge with AIDS with the Whitman Walker Clinic during the AIDS epidemic. I was one of the first openly LGBTQ political appointees in the district government and appointed to the HIV Planning Council, and I evaluated grant applications to make sure that the Ryan White funding was distributed equitably to minority communities. As chair of ANC2F, I supported the Whitman Walker Health expansion and the extension of the Capitol Pride Parade route to include the Logan Circle neighborhood. During my time in the district government as an ANC commissioner, I've helped many members of the LGBT community find employment and housing opportunities. When I get elected to the council on June 2nd, I will make sure that the Office of Human Rights is fully funded so that we can investigate the backlog of discrimination cases. I will also make sure that the funding is available for the Office of LGBTQ Affairs to issue the grant-making authority to a lot of these nonprofits that provide the important services to our community. Also, I was very instrumental when the DC Center was looking for a home. I had a meeting with Jim Graham and the mayor and secured the location at the Reeves Center. So I've been no stranger to the gay community, and I ask for your vote on June 2nd. And I ask you that because this election is too important. This is an opportunity to elect one of their own. This election is much larger than me as a gay man. This election is about an opportunity for our community, and we should not let that pass by us. And I say that because we have a lot of allies, and unfortunately, where have they been? Whether it was the legislation for the Care for LGBT Seniors with HIV Amendment Act of 2019, or Secure, Fair, and Equitable Trial Act of 2017. I was proud as the chairman of the ANC to introduce these two resolutions and get them passed so that we could move this legislation forward. So again, in Barney Frank's famous words, if you don't have a seat at the table, you become part of the menu. I ask you again for your vote on June 2nd and again on June 16th, and elect one of the members of your community that has been contributing to this city for many years. Thank you for your support and your consideration.
Thank you, John. Brooke, go ahead.
Thanks. So thank you so much to Racine and Lou and Krillios and all at Racine Pendarvis Productions and the Washington Blade. You all have been so wonderful in organizing this, as well as your wonderful reporting and advocacy for many of these issues, as well as helping to inform the voters with all the interviews and forums. So I'm really appreciative of that. And I'm also really appreciative for everybody who tuned in to watch today. I think like you and like all of the candidates running, we all care deeply about our community and want to be part of the solution to help recover from this crisis. And I think that's really nice to see how many engaged neighbors we have here. So as we discussed here tonight, I'm the former Assistant Attorney General for Policy and Legislative Affairs from the DC Office of the Attorney General. And prior to that time, I was a tax lawyer representing the DC Office of Tax and Revenue. And in my last job, I worked on citywide policy and legislation, but I also got to know our ward and what matters to our neighbors. In 2019 alone, I went to over 100 community meetings and heard directly from the ANCs and civic advocacy groups and other advocacy leaders and neighbors about what challenges they were facing. And that's why I was proud to work on legislation to enable our office to prosecute hate crimes, to protect our displaced tenants, and to protect our small businesses. And I want to continue on that work. But we are in a time of crisis. We are in the greatest crisis of modern times, and Ward 2 doesn't have a representative at the table right now, as all of these budget priorities are being negotiated. There's nobody at the table representing our voice, and that is really dangerous. And so going forward, I want to prioritize our small businesses so that they get the relief they need, and that our essential workers and hospitals have what they need to survive this. I want to ensure that our teachers and our children have what they need to have productive distance learning. I'm very worried that not all of our teachers had the adequate training they needed to provide meaningful and productive teaching programs online. And so that needs to be improved. I want to increase our anti-bullying efforts in our schools so we can teach our young kids at the very young age about inclusion. I want to make sure that harassment on the street is has meaningful penalties, because when anybody feels unsafe in our community, then we're all unsafe. And those are some major priorities. And as I noted, this is a time of crisis, and it makes it all but more important to protect the most vulnerable among us. And I know that caring for the most vulnerable among us and looking out for the long-term financial health of our city do not have to be mutually exclusive. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the Washington Post, as well as our Attorney General, Karl Racine. And I'm grateful for their faith in me and look forward to taking that honor very seriously on the council. I hope that I've earned your vote over the course of this election. And this evening, I want to encourage everybody to order their mail-in ballot. There will be 2 voting locations open in Ward 2, but it is much safer to order your mail-in ballot. So we're encouraging everybody, as well as the mayor's office is encouraging everybody, to order your ballot, which you can do on dcboe.org, or you can get an app on your phone called Vote for DC, VOTE, the number 4 DC. And I hope that you come with us on this campaign. We have weekly office hours every Wednesday on Zoom at 6 p.m. Email community@brookpinto for Ward 2 for the Zoom link. We'd love to have you answer any questions you may have, hear your suggestions or concerns. As I noted, we have a COVID recovery plan on our website at brookpintoforward2.com, but also love your feedback on that. If you think there are other things that we missed or aren't considering, we'd love to have your voice included in that process. And I hope that everybody stays safe and positive to the extent we can, and that we can get through this crisis together. And I really appreciate your consideration of your vote on June 2nd for the primary election for the Democratic nomination, as well as the special election on June 16th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you. Jack Evans.
Well, thank you very much for hosting this tonight, Racine and Carlos and Lou, and it's been a real pleasure to be here. What are people looking for in a council member, and a council member in particular representing Ward 2? I've represented the ward for the last 29 years, and most of the time is spent, believe it or not, on constituent services. And I've been known as having the best constituent service office on the council. Anyone who has dealt with my office knows that we are very responsive. And when you elect me, you don't just get me, you get the whole team. And those of you who are ANC commissioners and who have been active in the community know how important it is for the council member to have a staff, which I do, that is so capable. They are still there today, and I think that's an important note. There's a Ward 2 constituent office made up of all of my former staff members who are still serving people in Ward 2. As one of the great constituencies that I represent is the LGBTQ constituency. And Lou, you would remember, you interviewed me for this job 30 years ago, if you can believe it. It was in April of 1990. And I remember to this day that interview. When I was elected to the council, and before that, I was the ANC chairman in DuPont Circle. And when I was elected to the council, the first bill I introduced, as I promised, was to repeal the sodomy law. It had failed. And I had to reintroduce it and finally get it passed in 1993. And every issue from then on that affected the community, I was the leader on it. I was the first elected official in the region to support marriage equality, supported all of the domestic partnership legislation all the way through. And as Jim Graham described me, I'm not just a supporter, I'm an advocate. And as your council member, I will continue to be your best advocate. Also, as a council member, you need someone with an expertise. And it's no secret, my expertise is finance. Colby King referred to me in his article as the most knowledgeable financial person in the city today. And my expertise is needed now more than ever. We are facing a crisis, not dissimilar to the control board era 1996 crisis, but certainly like we had in 2001 and 2008, and many important decisions are going to have to be made. We're going to have to shrink a budget by about $800 million, not only this year, but next year as well. When put back on the council in January of next year, that will be the pivotal moment when these decisions are going to have to be made. Certainly the mayor will have a budget, it'll get passed at the end of June, But when the revenue estimates come out in August and then are put forward in October, it'll be January when really tough decisions have to be made. And you want someone like myself at the table representing not only the ward and all of the many projects that are financed in our current budget to make sure they get done, but somebody to represent the city to get us through this crisis. I am the only person, not only running in this election, but the only person who really brings that expertise to the table. So I ask all of you for your vote. Thank you very much for having the forum, and I look forward to continue to representing you on the council.
Thank you, Jack. And then I'll go to Kishan.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Well, thank you again so much for having me, Racine, the Blade, and all of your staff. You've been a pleasure to work with. I had such a fun experience with you all this year, starting at the high heel race in October in my old ANC district in the neighborhood on 17th Street. Had a great interview with you then, Racine, and then at the Studio Theater in the heart of Ward 2. It was an honor to interview with you just before the holidays. It's a shame we can't all be in person tonight, but it is nice to see everyone's faces here. And I appreciate all of my fellow candidates. And let me just start off by saying that I've always believed this famous quote that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so I want to tell you why I care so much about these issues. My mother and father were born in villages in India. They didn't have running water or electricity. They worked hard and had luck and got to this country and were lifelong public servants with the government. And they taught me to give back. I didn't come from privilege or money, but I lived my life to live by their example, to give back to my community. And so that's why I ran for ANC commissioner in 2 different neighborhoods of DC and of Ward 2. There's almost nobody who's crazy enough to do that twice in 2 different neighborhoods. There's definitely no one currently who has done it twice in 2 different neighborhoods. And I have many constituents and former constituents who I'm continuing to serve. Even if they're my former constituents, I continue to serve them because I care, because I want to improve our city for everyone. I will also say though, we are facing an unprecedented challenge right now, 100-year, once in a century challenge, a health and economic crisis, and that is affecting the health of our city, the public health, and the small business community of our city. And I do want to say that I believe that I am perfectly prepared to serve and to rise and to at this point and to help our city recover. I spent the last 6 years working on public health and small business issues for DC government, experience that I don't believe anybody else has to serve us right now in the biggest issue we will have, and we have and will have in for many years. I care about our small business community. Check out my Road for Recovery plan at my website, kishanfordc.com. It just got put out this evening, and I'm very proud to share it with you and to gather your input to make it even better, to serve the businesses of our community, the workers of our community, and the health of our community. We just opened a testing site in my neighborhood, and I'm very proud. If anybody needs testing, you let me know. We'll get you tested. It is so important to get people tested and to trace them, because I have the public health background to make sure that we do that to keep us safe and to safely reopen and recover. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, thank you. Now we'll go to Daniel.
So thanks to Team Racine, thanks to Lou and the Washington Blade for hosting this, virtual candidate forum. This is definitely a shift that we've all had to adjust with in these times. Speaking of these times, I think it's clear through, this whole campaign, through society in general, that there's a real desire for change, for fundamental change. And if you want fundamental change in your local government, I think you need to elect fundamentally different people. I think you need to elect people who you know will stand up for what's right, and what needs to get done, even if it's not politically expedient. Someone that you know when they say they stand for something, when they say they support something, or when they say they're against something, that's because they think that's what's best for for DC, for you, for our society. In particular, for this community, one of the questions that's come up at every Ward 2 candidate forum or conversation is we talk about the sex work decriminalization law because it's so important to marginalized communities. And I think, that's one of the key differentiators that you see here. Who stands in support for that? Who stands for what's right? I will give credit to one other candidate who just wants something similar, but in a different way. And I think that shows who, really cares and who is here for what's right. It's important to have someone that knows what it's like to grow up in a marginalized community or a marginalized neighborhood, that has that personal connection, that they don't care about consequences. They care about helping people. They care about doing the right thing. Again, I'm Daniel Hernandez. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about me, you can go to danielward2.com. I am on social media as well. Feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to chat at a distance, or maybe a little bit before the election, maybe we'll at least be able to go out and stand 6 feet apart. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the forum, and have a good night and upcoming weekend.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much. And to round us out, we have Jordan.
Thank you. Well, thank you to Racine and Lou and Krillios and the Blade and Team Racine. I think this has been such a fantastic discussion. I know we've had a chance to talk about a lot of specific issues, but I would want to take a step back for a second. As we're thinking about who's going to represent us as we confront this massive crisis, I think it's important to think about the experiences and values that that person will bring to the table. A lot of times politicians in DC and in DC government can say the right thing when they're in these types of forums or they're answering questions for advocacy groups, but their actions and their votes don't tell the same story. I think it's very important that we have a council member who's going to live their values. And, that's what I've tried to do throughout my life and throughout my career. That's what I've done working for President Obama and DC's Medicaid agency, on Capitol Hill, and for a DC federal judge. And, I think those experiences and values are part of the reason why I received the top rating from the Gay and Lesbian Activist Alliance just today. And you know what? I think that even if I don't win this election, I'm going to continue fighting that fight to make a more equitable and inclusive Ward 2 and a DC. I have to say, I'm running for not because I wanted to, so badly be called council member, or because I wanted to be an insider with the special interests at the Wilson building, or the lobbyists who, will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to our former council member for his time and attention. I'm running for a very simple reason. We in Ward 2 and in DC are at an inflection point. We are at risk of becoming a place where only the very wealthy can afford to live. And that has only become more clear as a result of the coronavirus crisis. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can make choices in this election to build a more progressive, a more equitable, and more inclusive society. And I think it starts with how we respond to COVID-19. I think now more than ever, it's important to redouble our commitment to our values. That means that we need to take more immediate action to help frontline workers. That's hospitality workers. That's teachers who are trying to make distance learning work. That's transit workers. That's our healthcare workers. And I have to say, all of the unions representing those groups have endorsed me in this campaign. And I think it's because of that experience and those values. I think it goes beyond, though, this immediate needs that we're seeing in coronavirus. It goes back to something we talked about before, which is the racial and economic and health disparities we've seen that have gotten, starker in this coronavirus crisis. And I have to say, it affects our LGBTQ community so deeply. We have folks at the margins and who are feeling discrimination, and there's so much inequity. We need to address it. And I think that is something we need to do in a broad way. That means that every single person in our community deserves a safe place to live that they can afford. That includes our LGBTQ youth who experience homelessness at much higher rates than other folks. We need to make sure that everyone has access to paid family medical and sick leave. I think this crisis has made clear how essential those safety nets are. And yet we're seeing some folks say we need to push back those programs and instead fund tax breaks for special interests and big, huge businesses. I think we need to invest in workers and families and small businesses who are worried about whether they can make the rent, whether that's tomorrow, May 1st, or whether that's when this public health emergency is lifted. We need big structural solutions to make it possible for workers and their families and our small businesses to survive and thrive right here in Ward 2. I hear all the time from folks who love our neighborhood. They want to stay, but they're feeling squeezed. Let's take action to make sure they can stay, whether you're a fifth generation DC resident like me, a recent immigrant, or any other member of our community. Our community is so important. Let's make it possible for everyone to survive, thrive, and live a vibrant and successful life here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordan. Let me hand it over to Racine to wrap us up.
We want to thank Lou and all about Lou from the Washington Blade, your entire staff at the Washington Blade, all of those who took the time to view on the Washington Blade's page. We want to thank all of those who have been watching. We want to thank our candidates. We want to thank Team Racine. I want to thank my amazing co-host, Krilios.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of those who helped sponsor. I think that we have a slide presentation that we will close out with.
Let's get it. Thank you so much, Racine. Thank you. And you know, I want to remind everyone to make sure that you're ready. Make sure that you're ready to vote. Make sure that you're ready to vote. And if you're ready, you can text Team Racine to 40649, and that's put on by headcount.org. Once again, text Team Racine to 40649. If you want to see our interviews with these various local candidates, plus other candidates from all across the DMV region, you can go to our YouTube channel, and that is at youtube.com/c/Team Racine. And you will see videos plus follow-up interviews with our candidates. Thank you so much. Now, for more information about everything else that is going on in DC's LGBTQ community, please visit washblade.com, washingtonblade.com, and follow @washblade on social media. Now, while we're all staying at home, please join us for other special events on Facebook Live. That is Music Mondays, Read a Book Wednesdays, First Wednesdays on May 6th, and Tantalizing Tuesdays. I hope you will join us. Thank you guys so much for attending and watching the DC Council Ward 2 Candidate Forum, moderated by Racine Pendarvis and put on in partnership with Team Racine and the Washington Blade. Thank you, HF Pharmacy, for being our production sponsor. Take us out, Racine.
Our final word for this evening is what we have learned through this very emotional time. We've learned that tomorrow is not promised. We must learn to love each other. We must learn to get along better, and we must learn to walk in light. And with all of those things, love can tear down mountains. It can build nations, and it can overcome fears. So learn from love, walk in light, and love each other better. Peace and blessings all, and good night.
Thank you, Racine.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching.
Bye, Krilios.
Bye.